I'm Brian Curry, Senior Account Manager here at Pink Elephant. And with me is Matt Bowles, our Director of Professional Services. And Matt, did you know that we've been deemed the industry's hottest new duo?
I read that. I'm not sure how we qualify after just one webinar, but I'll take it.
I'm going to take it and run with it. I think our next webinar is going to be live from Las Vegas in February while we're at our Pink19 event. That's a shameless plug there for our annual ITSM conference for those of you listening that want to check it out. Pink19 on our website. Look forward to seeing you there. Matt, what are we talking about today?
Excellent. Thanks, Brian. We're going to be talking about problem management today. And most specifically, we want to talk about being a little bit more proactive with problem management and how that fits into organizations in many environments today. Really the lack of proactive problem management. So we'll talk a little bit high level about the problem management process. We want to just highlight some of the differences between reactive, proactive problem management, as well looking at some additional good practices that you might want to consider as a part of your problem management practice. And then, of course, with these webinars, we do want to highlight some tools that are available to you through our online services, PinkATLAS. I'll turn things over to Brian to give you just a very brief demo of PinkATLAS and the valuable content that we have within there. I encourage you, if you do have questions during the webinar, we do have one of our colleagues monitoring the chat, and she'll highlight any questions that are coming up so that we can try and address those towards the end of the webinar. And if we don't get to all of the questions during the webinar, we'll certainly follow up afterwards. This presentation, the recording, is going to be made available to everybody that's registered for the event. So feel free to send out the registration information to colleagues or share that recording with colleagues once it's made available. Again, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your trust in us and in joining us for these sessions. Wish you all a very happy new year as well. I think I'm only 10 days into January, so I think we're still fair to wish people happy new year. And we'll kick things off with the information.
Matt, before you start, I want to let you know I got myself in trouble at home talking about problem management.
How's that?
Well, our Wi-Fi went out, and my wife said to me, "We've got a problem," and I told her that no, we had an incident, and I spent the night on the couch. So.
Yeah, I can see how that would happen, but yeah. It's a conversation many of us have.
Yes.
So, in terms of problem management, I think just from a high level perspective, we want to be managing the life cycle of problems. So what that means is, from a problem management process perspective, this is the process manager for this process is responsible for identifying and opening problem records. So we're the individual that's going to be looking at trying to identify where problems exist in the organization and working those through to some sort of resolution. Ideally to a successful conclusion where we've identified a known error state and we've corrected that permanently from the environment. But at a minimum, coming to terms with having a workaround in place, which is going to enable us to minimize the impact of those incidents over time. But we've consciously made a decision that this is something that we're not going to remove from the environment. So that idea of life cycle management of problems is a key one for problem management that we want to keep in mind. Of course, we want to use this process as a way of minimizing the impact of incidents and problems in the environment. So as often as we can, we want to try and ensure that we're providing documentation, support information to service desk, our knowledge management processes, on appropriate workaround steps to minimize what to do in the event of incident recurrence. And this is where we really need to be a little bit more focused, I think, is proactively prevent the recurrence. So that's really looking at investigating using a number of different methods and steps to identify what are common incidents within the environment. So being a little bit more proactive in terms of going out into the environment, doing some analysis, looking at trends and issues that have been recurring, and try to come up with ways to provide a permanent fix for those. So objectively, we want to prevent problems and resulting incidents from happening. So while we're not necessarily going to eliminate things altogether, we need to make sure that we're clearly providing a way forward for our customers, for our users, in how they're interacting with the systems and technology that they have. So we want to try and prevent as much as possible disruption on a day-to-day basis. And as we all know, it can be very frustrating for our end users where they're seeing recurring incidents, where they've had to call the service desk, where they've reported through self-service this incident time after time after time, and they're not seeing that there's any sort of improvement to how frequent it happens or what the steps are to reduce this. And so that creates an awkward perception that they might have of IT. So minimize the impact again by providing good documentation, good information around the workarounds. We can ensure that we're restoring service as quickly as possible, again supporting that objective of incident management through the documentation that we create as we're doing the analysis of the problems. You can see in the call out in the image over to the side that I've sort of highlighted CSI as a key sort of tie-in to problem management. And the reason that I do that is that from a continual service improvement perspective, problem management should be playing a key role in terms of the integration between those two process areas or two practices that you might be following. So as we're doing sort of analysis and identification of potential improvements, problem management can play a very key role in either feeding improvement opportunities to continual service improvement, but also taking some of the service improvement ideas from CSI and working through those in terms of running, a 5 Whys or a Kepner-Trego, different problem analysis methodologies to identify what the best solution would be for us to implement an improvement moving forward. So you need to keep in mind that problem management and continual service improvement really play a critical role in helping organizations to become more proactive and provide more improvement to services that they're providing. Whether those are technology focused, maybe it's process focused, maybe it's service focused, but there's opportunity there for these two processes to work much more closely together than I typically see in organizations.
Well, Matt, I heard you mention a couple of root cause analysis techniques in there. And I think my favorite of those is the 5 Whys. And for those of us with children, we all know that they're going to be excellent problem managers because they don't just stop at 5 Whys. They typically go up to 25 Whys.
Yeah, that's true. And the 5 Whys is a great tool to go through because you can really get to a level of detail. And as a parent, it might be frustrating, but when you're going through and really trying to identify what the cause of something might be, drilling down to that level can really pinpoint some specific areas of concern. So here's a couple of examples on this slide around reactive versus proactive problem management. So obviously, from a definition perspective, reactive means that we are reacting, we are doing something in response to an incident or something that's occurred. So the most common type of problem management that I've observed from a consulting and from a practitioner point of view is we've had a significant incident which has caused us to create a problem, to investigate why that major incident occurred, and we're trying to identify potential workarounds, identify what the impact is, and really get a better response in terms of how to ensure that that type of major significant incident doesn't occur. Whether it's through a customer complaint or a major incident, these are things that we're doing in response to something else. Proactive is more around the analysis and the identification of problems through trend analysis, through looking at various reports, whether that's availability, whether that's capacity, event data, looking at our incident data more specifically. One of the sort of easy ways of potentially identifying problems is through a top 10 categorization report that you could run from an incident management perspective. So if you look at the incident reports and you structure it in such a way where you can run what were the top 10 categories of incidents that I had this week, and that gives you a very clear view of common categorization of incidents, and through a little bit more digging, you can start to identify if there were any specific trends with those incidents. So did we get down to a specific application or a specific system that might have been causing this? And based on what we're seeing, should that then trigger us to look at doing some problem analysis? And again, it's this type of trend analysis that I don't think organizations are quite focused on yet in terms of putting this into play. And so we can talk about why some of that might be is around some challenges that organizations face, right? So resourcing is potentially one of the larger challenges. Is how do we resource against this process? So how do we allocate people? So do we need to put in a full team? Is it a dedicated team? Is it a more of a matrix team? And my thoughts around this is we want to be able to treat problem management somewhat like a small project team. So if we've identified a problem or a problem within our environment, we've created that. What we want to be able to do is create a small team of cross-sectional team of subject matter experts that can contribute to the analysis and investigation of that particular problem. So it's not necessarily we've got a dedicated team of problem analysts that are always doing this. It's a little bit more dynamic, where we're tapping people on the shoulder for a specific problem based on their knowledge and their specific area of expertise to help support problem resolution, documenting of a workaround, and ensuring that the knowledge is captured appropriately.
So Matt, I'm obviously on the sales end of things here, but if I was on the other side of the fence in IT, I think outside of being CIO, I would really enjoy being part of a problem management team. Just being able to wear that Sherlock Holmes hat and get down to the issues and figure out how to solve these problems. I think that would be pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. I think working in the problem management space is a little bit more interesting. You're never quite sure, and certainly you could say the same from an incident perspective. You're never quite sure what your day is going to look at. But problem management, it's small projects that can have a significant impact if we actually get to a point where we're able to resolve them, eliminate them from the environment, which is a pretty gratifying sort of end of life for that problem. So being able to go through that quick life cycle and have that good experience at the end in terms of determining, yeah, we've got the fix, we've got the resolution, and we're good to go. Let's start working on the other. So So by creating these small project teams, you can actually have multiple problems being worked on at the same time. So you're not necessarily overloading one particular individual. But we do need to make sure that we've got some dedicated support in doing the analysis. So doing the problem identification is a key role where we might want to have a number of people involved to help do that identification. To support some of the work. We also want to make sure that the team members that we have working on problem management have the right skills. So have we provided them with some problem analysis training, education? So are they familiar with different methodologies like Kepner-Trego, like Ishikawa, like the 5 Whys? So do they have knowledge of how these different methodologies can help them, and which methodology might be most appropriate based on the identification of the problem that they're potentially working on. Also, the documentation side of things is sometimes a little bit weak, making sure that the documentation is clear, concise, that it's been validated. Sometimes the disconnect happens between what the problem management team has documented as a workaround versus what might be documented within your knowledge base. So ensuring that there's some integration there between the two practices, and that what problem management provides in the way of clearly documented steps for a workaround really is what takes precedence in terms of what we would apply to a customer or to a user that's experiencing an issue that's related to this particular problem. So I think there's another sort of a couple of frameworks certainly that you could be looking at in support of your problem management practice. And one of those is taking more of an agile approach to problem management. So agile is a great methodology to use where the work is planned. So if you take the idea of these small project teams working on a particular problem, what you could do is you could actually expand that into that team is now going to be involved in a particular set of problem categories. So that team becomes an agile team that's going to take on problems that have been classified in a particular way. So what they then have is somebody's taking on the role, the problem manager would sort of take on the role of a product owner in prioritizing those individual problems, and through the use of a Kanban board or some other tool, the problem team, that Scrum team, if you will, working from a problem management perspective, is going to be selecting problems and working through in very quick iterations a resolution, documentation of workarounds, identification of known error, and ideally proposing what that final solution would look like for that particular problem. So Agile is a very compatible methodology to apply through problem management. So I'd certainly highlight that as a good sort of reference point for you to be looking at in terms of trying to improve the speed and the agility of how you're managing problems within your environment. So if you can imagine sort of 3 or 4 or 5 of these cross-functional teams working in support of problem management, sort of at a fixed cadence in terms of how they're going to work through these problems, I mean that's going to have a lot of benefit to you in how you're working through your problem management process. The other, of course, is taking some lean principles, so running Kaizen events as a way of doing the problem analysis, so clearly defining that statement, pulling in people of the right with the right knowledge and skills to run through a Kaizen event, to document appropriate changes to process or systems that will have a positive outcome for this particular problem. So looking at Agile, looking at lean principles, These are a couple of ways that that you can be sort of shifting gears, not away from ITIL, but in compatibility with ITIL or integrating with some of your ITIL practices to really take some benefit here. So when we talk about improving processes, we always come back to the CSI model. So when we're looking at whether it's a process, service, or any sort of improvement initiative that you're looking at, you really have to clearly define what is it that you're trying to do. So with problem management, as you go back to your teams and start having conversations around what might we want to do in terms of improving our problem management process, how can we become more proactive? What is it that you're trying to achieve? So clearly define that. Really take a very clear look, objective look at where you are currently. So establishing some current baselines, and what are the improvements that you want to be able to see in terms of measurable targets. So using this model as a methodology, and whether you want to use this or you want to use something like DMAIC from a lean perspective, again, these are good tools for you to be looking at as you move forward in terms of documenting and defining improvements.
Matt, I'm wondering, in your opinion, how important is it for someone who's deemed the problem management owner to not be involved with incident management as also the incident management owner? So they should be separated, right?
Yeah. So it's my perspective that these should be separate individuals, because they have separate objectives. So even if you look at a major incident, we should always be looking at, from an incident management perspective, restoration of service as quickly as possible. In some cases, in that same incident that's occurring, and even though it's significant, even though it's major, we may not have all of the data that we need from a problem management perspective to actually come up with a permanent fix down the road. So we might be at odds with each other in terms of restoring as quickly as possible versus the value of capturing some data. So there's always going to be some challenge and some friction between the two roles. Incidents are not problems. Problems are not incidents. They're certainly related, and there's some compatibility there, but they should be managed by two different individuals in an organization. So it's one of the areas where typically Pink Elephant is going to recommend that you have separate people owning those two process areas. So at Pink Elephant, we use our PinkScan as a way of benchmarking process maturity. And if you look at the sort of the scores from initial down to I don't know, that's sort of the capability model that we're using in terms of evaluating process maturity. So you can see from an industry perspective, based on our PinkScan data, most organizations are falling underneath the repeatable. They're more at the initial stage, which means that they might have some documentation. It's probably not consistently applied across the organization. They may not have done some formal training. They may not have sort of clearly defined roles and responsibilities. So it's a little bit ad hoc. When you move from the initial into repeatable, then you're starting to get common process, common documentation. We've defined roles and responsibilities. There's measures and targets that we have in place. And that's really what we want to be seeing organizations moving towards, is the repeatable, because once you're at a repeatable step, it's really a very small move to get from repeatable into managed. And ideally, managed is where you should be striving for. Going into defined and then managed. Going into optimized is not something that we typically see from an assessment perspective, nor do we often recommend that you strive for that level because the costs sort of outweigh the value and the benefit that you would potentially receive for that process.
So for those of you listening who have a really solid problem management process, you got to get the PinkScan from us to bump that up to just over a 2.
That's the sales guy again. All right, Brian. So what do you want to tell us about PinkATLAS?
I want to tell you lots, but first I have to see if I can share my screen.
So I've just given you control, so it's all yours.
Well, let's see if this works. Oh, we don't want to see my email. How's that? Are we looking at PinkATLAS?
Yes, we are.
Right on. I love it when that works. All right. So PinkATLAS is a service that Pink Elephant has to help with getting all of your processes documented and in place. It's a library of hundreds of artifacts and templates that you download and tweak to make your own. So we're going to take a look at some problem management ones, obviously, because that's really the area of focus here. But there's some other bells and whistles that I'll touch on as it pertains to Atlas. So there's 3 iterations of it available, but what we're looking at here is available in all iterations of the Atlas. So, you know, for starters, if you do decide, hey, this is a service we could really benefit from, you do get an Ask the Expert portal. So you get to talk to smart people like Matt about anything ITSM related. And yeah, you just send in your questions, comments, concerns. If you want to upload some files for review, great. Maybe Matt can answer these via email, or maybe they set up 30-minute calls. And you can use that as often as you'd like. So it's a great way to have that sort of ad hoc consulting available to you. Over here is all the downloadable content. Now, there is the ITIL books in browsable format, but those aren't downloadable, just browsable. And you can also get discounts through the stationary office bookstore as well, if you wanted hard copies of them. You can obviously tell, you know, what's included here. You know, again, a lot of stuff, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time, so I don't want to spend a huge amount of time going over each one of these sections, lean or change. Program management is all about your ITSM program, not process specific, but again, just dozens and dozens of downloadable content in different formats available. And then really the meat and potatoes of everything here is all of your ITIL processes. So I know where problem management is. I know that's in service operation. There we go, problem management. And you can see, whoa, look what we get here. Get some kickoff decks, implementation plans, charters. Oh, there's our documentation that we need. That's what people would literally spend hundreds of hours potentially designing. And here you're going to have it pretty much 80% complete, ready to go. Each process has a lot of supplemental material as well. So you can see what's available here, what type of format it's in. And when we're done here, you're going to see our emails. And if you do see any document that you want as a sample, just shoot us a message and we'll be happy to send something over. But yeah, a lot of stuff there. Now, some of you are probably well aware that there's a new version of ITIL going live next month, ITIL 4. All of this content is based on the current version, version 3. As Axelos develops the more advanced content to ITIL 4, we will ultimately be updating content accordingly. But right now, it's all at current version. So let's take a quick look at some of these documents here. In the overview document, this is where we're going to talk about roles and responsibilities. What's the benefit of the process? What's the scope? You get an idea of how these are all laid out as well. We've even put blue text in there for areas that we're virtually certain you're going to want to edit. But this gives you an idea of how it's all formatted. I'm just going to boogie down to the roles and responsibilities. There we go. And we've got the process owner and the process manager follows. And then analysts. Always got to have analysts. So that gives you an idea on that overview document. And then we get into, okay, high-level design. It's taking a little bit too long for some of these to load up, so I'm going to click on a bunch of them. In high-level design, did I get there? Yes, high-level design. So in this one here, this is going to show you your process flow that you've probably seen in the ITIL books, but it's also going to go over all of your policies. How does COBIT come into play? What is the integration with other processes as well? So there's your diagram you've probably seen from the book. Activity description. RACI. And, whoa, lots of policies. Probably more than you're going to need. We've actually got quite a few policies for every single process here. So anybody that ends up getting Atlas, I always say download the original copy, put it somewhere safe, work off of that one, because if at some point if you decide, no, I don't want to pay Pink Elephant for Atlas anymore, you'll always have that original copy. All right, COBIT, and then of course integration. All right, so again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on all these, just kind of give you an idea. This is the management information document. So the reports, who gets what from where, how often, what are the KPIs and critical success factors, all that fun stuff. All right. And then I'll go into the Big Daddy document here, the detailed design. This is the document that can sometimes get up to 100+ pages depending on which process it is. It takes the high-level process flow and really blows it up into a step-by-step activity flow. And I'm going to just warn you, my eyes start to cross as I start scrolling down here. This goes into a little bit more detail than the ITIL books do. This is really based on well over 20+ years of experience that our consultants have had out in the field putting this together. All of the flows do come in Visio as well. I know that as I've done demos on Atlas before, people seem to be impressed with that. They like getting the flows in Visio. It's worth mentioning. Yeah, I think it's about here where it all starts to look really Greek to me. So this gives you an idea of the level of detail that Atlas goes into for each specific process. And that's really just what we want to key on in here. So we've taken a look at what some of the downloadable content is with Atlas. I just want to give you a quick view of the 3 options that are available. Silver, gold, platinum, not bronze, silver, gold. We actually go right up to platinum here. Various price points. If there's people here that are listening who are not in United States, these are in US dollars, but there is Canadian dollars available. So everything that we went through, Ask the Expert portal, all the downloadable stuff, great. User licenses 1, 2, or 3. That is how many people can be poking around the content at the same time. There are self-paced training courses available. So we've got a pretty good-sized portfolio of training courses, 5, 10, or 15, and virtual instructor-led. So live instructor-led sessions via WebEx, 0 on silver, or 5 or 10. And then some consulting hours, either 1 hour at a time or book a day. If you want to pay for the travel, we can have our consultant on site. The assessment tool that we touched on briefly called PinkScan, that's a do-it-yourself process assessment tool. It is bundled up with the Platinum option. Some organizations like to purchase that all on its own. and that's half the price, 12,500. So, I mean, right there, you're getting half the value here. And if you ever want to bring us on site to do group training, a little bit of a discount off the trainer fee. And you know, I did that plug for our conference right at the beginning, and yeah, you'd get 10% off the fees there. So a lot of features with the options. That's sort of PinkATLAS in a nutshell. Some people call it consultant in a box, tool, ITSM toolkit, suite of services, however you want to frame it. A lot of different ways it can support your program. So, Matt, I want to see if I can throw this back over to you, but that requires me.
I can just steal it, Brian.
That's good.
So that's a pretty good overview. The one of the most underused features, I think, of PinkATLAS is the Ask the Expert. The fact is that we're giving you access to all of the content, but then we're backing that up with access to our consultant team. So any questions that you have as you're going through your improvement or your initiative or your design work, if you need to engage with us or have a question, you know, you use that Ask the Expert feature, reach out to us, and we engage with you and support you through that activity. So it's an underused feature of the tool, but something that can be extremely valuable in terms of helping you move forward. I think people just lose sight of the fact that they have access to that once they've downloaded a lot of the content. So you're not on your own. It is a 12-month subscription period. So during that time, you have full access to us to support you on your initiative. If we've got just a couple of minutes, I'm going to just try and address. There have been a few questions coming in, so I'm going to try and address those maybe at a superficial level, but I will try to answer them. So the first question came in was, how do we ensure teams don't get overwhelmed with problem ownership? So my recommendation there is to ensure that everybody knows that the problem manager that you've defined, or the process owner, the problem manager that's sort of coordinating and managing the problems, they own the problem record. The problem is owned by the problem management team. So they're the ones that are accountable to ensure that activities and progress are being made. So even though you've got a cross-functional team that's maybe assigned, and maybe there's a point person that's a subject matter expert in that group that's running point on that, they don't have ownership. They're just responsible for doing the analysis, doing the documentation, identifying, pardon me, what that resolution is. So make it clear in how you roll this out that ownership rests with the problem management team.
Matt, that was a good answer. My answer would have been buy PinkATLAS and use Ask the Expert.
Fair enough.
Okay.
So with the understanding that it's a difficult question, and he's decided to ask it anyway, is there any sort of industry standard for average time to resolve a problem ticket in IT service management? So I am not aware of an average or a standard for the resolution, and part of the problem is because each problem is very unique. It's difficult to assess what the duration might be to actually come to a resolution. And so typically the recommendation that I would provide to customers in terms of setting this is creating SLAs around the root cause analysis activities. So if it's a high priority problem that we've identified, we want to determine root cause within a 5-day period. So we're using the same prioritization model that we might use from an incident perspective, but we have different targets, different timeframes that we're measuring against to establish against that. So while I'm not aware of an industry standard or a specific metric that provides that information, I think don't necessarily get caught up on what an industry average might be doing, but look at trying to create service levels or targets that are specific to your organization that you can start measuring against. Because if you're not measuring against anything at the moment, then you're missing out on opportunities to identify and look for opportunities to improve. And the last question that came through the chat was going back to my suggestion around top 10 incident categorization as a way of looking forward. And the context of a question is any guidance or any helpful hints around how do we create sort of a categorization model or categorize incident tickets to assist with this effort. And I think the easiest thing that I can say in sort of just the remaining minute that we have here is to try and ensure that your categorization model is simple. I've gone into organizations, and I know many of my team members have gone into organizations and seen categorization models that spawn sort of thousands of items, which is just overly complicated to do any sort of analysis or metrics. Because what happens is, as incidents are coming in, the team that's responsible, your service desk, is probably not consistently categorizing the incidents to begin with, which means that doing any sort of a top 10 analysis from a problem management perspective isn't going to give you an accurate view. So keep your categorization model somewhat simple, and you want to make sure that the categorization model from an incident perspective is the same categorization model that you're using from a problem perspective, so that there's consistency across there. If you'd like some more information, I encourage you to reach out to Brian or I. Happy to give you some more details through that. Here's Brian's contact details. Again, appreciate you joining us today. Hope you found some benefit and value in the conversation that we've had, and look forward to you joining our next session.
Yes, live from Las Vegas. Everyone, really appreciate your time. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.